Ever wonder what it was really like to buy a new car in the 70s? Not the fantasy version you see in movies, but the real deal. What did it feel like to walk into a showroom, flip through a brochure, and dream about hitting the open road? Well, today, we're going back in time. We're going to forget everything we know about modern cars, modern marketing, and modern life. We're diving headfirst into the 1970s, using only authentic materials from that decade. No fancy restorations, no polished auction photos, no modern car shows, just real, grainy, forgotten media, the stuff that's been hiding in attics and basements for 50 years. This is the 70s, as they actually were. The decade kicked off with a bang. The muscle car wars were still raging, but the writing was on the wall. Horsepower was king, and every manufacturer was trying to one-up the other. You'd open up a magazine and be hit with these wild, colorful ads. The Humbler, Pontiac called its GTO. Dodge was all about the Scat Pack, with its bumblebee stripes and aggressive graphics. These weren't just cars. They were statements. They promised freedom, power, and a little bit of rebellion. The brochures from this era are incredible. They weren't just spec sheets. They were lifestyle catalogs. You'd see a family piling into a massive station wagon for a camping trip, its wood grain siding gleaming under the sun. Or a young couple, laughing as they cruised down a coastal highway in a shiny new convertible. It was all about selling a dream, an American dream printed on glossy paper. The photography had this warm, almost golden hue, a look we now call Kodachrome. It made everything feel a little more optimistic, a little more perfect than it probably was. But as the early 70s rolled on, a shadow began to fall over Detroit. Two big words started appearing everywhere: insurance and emissions. The gas-guzzling big blocks that had defined the late 60s were becoming expensive to insure and were being targeted by new environmental regulations. You can see the shift happening right in the dealer flyers. Suddenly, the ads started talking more about personal luxury and less about raw quarter-mile times. The Ford Thunderbird, once a sporty two-seater, had grown into a massive personal coupe. The Chevrolet Monte Carlo became a huge seller, offering plush interiors and long hoods that suggested power, even if the engines underneath were being tamed. It was a time of transition. The party wasn't over, but the music was definitely changing. You could feel the industry trying to figure out what was next. What did people want if it wasn't pure, unadulterated horsepower? The answer, it seemed, was comfort. And then, in late 1973, everything changed overnight. The oil crisis hit. Gas stations suddenly had long lines, or no gas at all. The price of fuel skyrocketed. This wasn't just a headline in the newspaper. It was a daily reality that you can see reflected in home movies from the time. Grainy 8mm films show cars lined up for blocks, people waiting anxiously. The effect on the auto industry was immediate and brutal. Those big, beautiful V8s that were the pride of America just a few years earlier were now seen as liabilities. The party was officially over. The shift was seismic. Suddenly, ads weren't about power or luxury. They were about miles per gallon. It was a complete reversal. Overnight, the stars of the showroom floor were no longer the muscle cars, but the compacts. Cars like the Ford Pinto, the Chevy Vega, and the AMC Gremlin were pushed to the forefront. Dealer brochures that once boasted about cubic inches now proudly displayed MPG in huge letters. And the imports, which had been a niche market, saw their chance. Datsun and Toyota, with their small, efficient, and reliable cars, suddenly looked like the smartest choice on the road. You can see it in the scanned magazine comparison tests from 74 and 75. A Datsun B210 with its Lil Hustler slogan was suddenly being cross-shopped with American icons. The photography in the ads changed, too. It became less about epic landscapes and more about everyday life, commuting to work, running errands, navigating a world where gas was a precious commodity. The optimism of the early decade gave way to a more practical, sober reality. This era also gave birth to what we now call the malaise era. It's a term enthusiasts use to describe the mid to late 70s, a time when performance hit rock bottom. New emissions equipment, like the catalytic converter, choked the life out of engines. A Corvette from 1975, the pinnacle of American sports cars, might have only made 165 horsepower. It was a tough time for car lovers. But it was also a time of incredible creativity. Since they couldn't sell speed, manufacturers sold style. This was the golden age of tape stripes, decals, and graphics packages. You could get a Golden Eagle Jeep, a Macho Power Wagon, or a Pontiac Trans Am with a massive, screaming chicken decal plastered across the hood. It was pure, unapologetic visual flair. The brochures from 77 and 78 are a riot of color and bold designs. It was as if the designers were saying, if we can't go fast, we can at least look fast. And they leaned into it hard. Luxury also took on a new meaning. It became about extreme comfort, what they called Brougham style. Think crushed velour seats, pillow-top upholstery, opera windows, and wire-wheel hubcaps. Cars like the Chrysler Cordoba with its rich Corinthian leather, as pitched by a famous actor, became massive hits. They were quiet, they were smooth, and they isolated you from the road. Home movies from the period show these land yachts floating down the highway, the epitome of 70s style. They might not have been fast, but driving one was an experience. It was about arriving in comfort, cocooned in a world of plush fabrics and simulated wood-grain trim. This was the new American automotive dream, a personal sanctuary on wheels, a quiet escape from a noisy world. But even in the darkness of the malaise era, there were sparks of light. The Trans Am, thanks to a certain movie about a bandit, became a cultural icon. It proved that style and attitude could sell, even if horsepower numbers were low. And towards the very end of the decade, you started to see the first signs of a comeback. Ford introduced the Fox Body Mustang in 1979. It was lighter, more modern, and hinted at a return to performance. It was a clean break from the big, heavy cars of the mid-70s. Looking at the dealer flyers for the '79 Mustang, you can sense a renewed energy. The ads talked about the boss is back, even if it was a bit of an exaggeration. It represented hope. The industry had weathered the storm of the oil crisis and the new regulations, and it was starting to find its footing again. As we look back through these faded photos and grainy films, we see a decade of incredible change. It started with the peak of American muscle, descended into a crisis that changed everything, and ended with the first glimmers of a new kind of performance. It was a messy, complicated, and often frustrating decade for cars, but it was also endlessly fascinating. It was a time of wild style, bold colors, and an industry forced to completely reinvent itself on the fly. These old brochures and magazines aren't just artifacts. They're time capsules. They show us not just the cars people drove, but the world they lived in, the dreams they were sold, and the challenges they faced. This was the real 1970s. No gloss, no polish, just the way it was. Thanks for taking this trip back with me. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more journeys into the past.